Okay, hi everybody. Maybe I need makeup, but I don't have it. I'm Rabbi Tobin. I'm at B'nai Shalom in West Orange, and this is our Monday Talmud class, a scheduling note. Believe it or not, we are actually getting to the end of the summer. It'll be over before you know it, and the holidays come right on time this year, as they always do, but this time it's right after Labor Day. So, we have class next week, which is Monday the 6th, and then we have class the following Monday. No, we do not have class the following Monday, the 13th, or the 20th, or the 27th, or any Monday in the month of September. So,
About August, just next week.
today's the last day of August.
No, July.
July. She asked about July. I'm saying August 6th, the first Monday in August, next week, is our last class.
Oh, really?
It is our last class. Can you believe it? Until after the holidays.
Are you going to resume it?
August.
I have every intention of resuming after the holidays if you'll all promise to come back. Okay? By the way, I'm not sure if you all remember from our first class, but full credit for this thing existing goes to Herb Rosansky. Herb came to me about 2 years ago, and he said, I read an article about learning Talmud, so I want to do that. And I said, Herb, that's a great idea.
My son said this to me.
And he's passing that article around because it is the inspiration for what it is we are doing. It may or may not have anything to do with what I do, but it is what got the ball rolling. It is what Aristotle would call an immediate cause.
Yes, you didn't know anything about Talmud before her.
Yeah, I went off and learned Talmud in a weekend so I could come and teach it. No, I sat Herb down and I said, Herb, that's a lovely idea. Do you know what the Talmud is? He said, no. And I said, okay, so let me show you what you need to know to learn Talmud. And I kind of went through what we did in our first class with these are the rabbis, this is when they lived, this is what Judaism was like, this is the Mishnah, which happens after the destruction of the temple, and then this is the diaspora, and this is where Talmud was written, and then Talmud turns into Halacha, and Talmud is about a 500-year span of literature, and is not a unified voice, and it's written in Aramaic, and it's a line-by-line commentary on the Mishnah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I had gotten in about 5 minutes, and, Herb had that look that husbands have when they realize it was a mistake to ask their wife what they were supposed to get at the store today or something like that. They ask the question and then they realize I would have done better not to ask this question and just to kind of try and find a way on my own to answer this. No, he was not chagrined but duly intimidated. And I said, that said, I'm happy to do an intro to Talmud class, and we'll see how many people are interested in coming and learning what the Talmud is, and if those people then want to go and study Talmud itself after, we'll do that, and you'll recall that's exactly what happened. So, and here you all are, and have been every Monday for, a half a year, since the spring anyways. So, thank you, Herb, for inspiring us to this class and creating this as part of the fabric of adult learning at B'nai Shalom. And now you call me. Really? Now you call me. All right, hang on just a second. Life of the Rabbi, is there a way to mute this? I can't pick it up and have it record. Oh well, it'll come back. He'll be okay. Okay, so now, what page are we on? If you were here last time, you saw that we got to the top of 16a. We got to 16a. Remember, to be helpful, the booklets that I made for you, I hand wrote pages in pink in the corner. Most of them have, and it's the pink 14 is what we're looking at. But in the classical printing of the page itself, the Talmud calls this page 16a of Tractate Chagiga.
Is this the same as yours?
There are multiple 16As. If the translation spills onto a second English page, that page is also called 16A because they're still translating 16A, which is why I wrote handwritten 13, 14, 15 consecutively so we could get to the right page together.
It's the first 16A.
It's the first 16A.
Whosoever speculates,
Um,
is that on the right-hand column?
I
Yes.
don't have it in front of me. Okay, very good. Okay, so the first thing that happens at the top of 16A is what did Rabbi Akiva expound? And they're going back to the Arba Shenichnesu Lepardes, right? So before going to the garden or into paradise, and as you know, Ben Zoma dies, Ben Azai goes crazy, Elisha Ben Abuya turns into a heretic, although the phrase is he cut down the shoots, and we don't know exactly what that means, and we still haven't seen exactly what that means, although there was one story that had to do with him and the kids in the schoolhouse that had a potentially violent interpretation or ending, which we all rejected, but nevertheless, that's as close as we ever get to any explanation, which doesn't fit at all, because that story is after Elisha ben Abuya had already given up hope,
Yeah.
right? So he couldn't have become a heretic at the time he cut down the shoots if those are the shoots we're talking about, because the chronology's long. He was a heretic always, right? How do we know he was a heretic always? What are the two things he did that were proof of how he was ra'ah, he was evil or bad inside of himself all the time? What were the two examples they gave?
The radish,
No, that came after as well.
riding a donkey.
Came after.
Well, he had
Came
a
after?
tutor who was Greek.
Okay, so
He read Greek
he had
books.
Greek books in his lap in the Beit Midrash, and every time he stood up, the Greek books fell on the floor, and he always was humming Greek songs.
Culture.
So and when it says what happened to him, he halach l'tarbut ra'ah, he went over to the evil culture. So he acculturated as a Greek. Or in those days, that would have been the culture of Rome, which saw itself as the inheritor of the high Greek culture of the ancient world. So this is all, he was a philosophical, acculturated Greco-Roman person in his behavior. And he was devoted to the Beit Midrash and the study of Torah, and he was a rabbi.
He was a genius.
He was a brilliant man, and he was a teacher, and he was a scholar, and he was a Talmid Chacham who went over to evil culture. So he's never called Rav Elisha. It's always Elisha ben Abuya. So people want to undercut and say, well, he was never a rabbi. He was just a heretic who knew a lot of Torah. That's ridiculous, because Rabbi Meir calls him my teacher. So you don't have lay people teaching Rabbi Meir. It doesn't work that way. So he was a rabbi who went out. The bat kol from heaven condemned him and closed the gates of tshuva to him. And when that happened, he went to the prostitute and said, if I'm going to do the time, I might as well do the crime. Right? I'm going to be punished. There's nothing I can do. And everything else is around whether or not Rabbi Meir's hope and optimism for him that he was still redeemable was grounded in any sense of sanity, or was Rabbi Meir just fooling himself? And all of the stories seem to say very clearly Rabbi Meir was fooling himself. The Talmud, the editorial level of the Talmud, and the stories that have been brought together all leave Elisha ben Abuya out on his own merits. Rabbi Meir, after he dies, gets the smoke to come from the grave, which isn't exactly a great unambivalent symbol. And another rabbi says only on the strength of our Torah learning can anything be done to anybody, and he basically claims absolute superpowers as a Talmid Chacham, and that seems to have a resolution for Elisha ben Abuya in the world to come, but not on his own merits. Okay, so the Talmudic editorial collection in this chapter of Chagiga leaves Elisha ben Abuya on the outside looking in when it comes to his status as a person of the covenant.
Who did the bat kol talk to?
The bat kol said.
But
It
there's-
didn't say the bat kol said to and or at a place, it was just the bat kol. Yatsa bat kol. It was earlier in the chapter, if someone wants to. It's right before where the prostitute names him Acher. Ay, 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 ay. If someone finds it, great.
Well, I found where he mutilated the shoots, but I don't know.
Uproots a radish. It's 2/3 of the way down 15A. So I don't know which 15A of yours it is.
Oh, a bottle, one
I
fourth
see
of
it.
it, except up here. It's, yeah, 15A.
And where's the and what is the
I see it.
where does the bot hole show up? What does it say?
About colon fourth and said, return ye backsliding children except Acher.
So that's in the context of a dialogue between Acher and Meir. What is the meaning of that which is written? So Acher is asking nudnik questions of Meir. Meir is answering them well. Acher uses Rabbi Akiva against him to show that, look, it's too late for me, it's too late for me, it's too late for me. Meir tries to go, yes, no, it's not, no, it's not, no, it's not. And Meir says to Acher, Af ata chazor b'cha, you too return. Amar lo, Acher said, Kevar shamati ma'achorei hapargod, shuvu vanim chutz me'acher. So Acher heard this in one of his mystical journeys, where he is in the heaven of heaven. So presumably that would conflate with the story of Metatron the angel, where he has Metatron taken out and whipped for sitting while writing the merits of Israel. And at the end of that story, Acher is soundly rejected. Okay? So, Acher is told this by the Kadosh Baruch Hu personally,
Okay.
which, by the way, technically makes him a Navi, a prophet. But it's a bat kol, so a bat kol is not nevuah. But how he could be hearing the bat kol in a personal way, there's a lot of things that don't really line up here. Right? The bat kol is by definition the way the rabbis have communication from God that is not considered nivuah, but they don't talk about what the mechanical difference of that is. It doesn't come through a person, I guess. A bat kol doesn't come from a person, so there's no navi for the nivuah. Okay, so we did all of that, and we got to 16a, and Rabbi Akiva is back in the journey to the garden, where this mix of horrible and wonderful things happened. And we did last time the quote, the Gemara has asked the question, what did Rabbi Akiva say when he saw whatever it was he saw that stopped him from having any of the bad things happen? So all three of the other people say or do or see something there, and a bad thing happens and they have a bad outcome. So what was it that Rabbi Akiva was able to do, say, or not see to prevent him from having such a bad outcome? And there's a little conversation that we did last time. Rabbi Bar Bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and God approached with some of the holy myriads, and from this we know that Rabbi Akiva thought, Othu Baravava Shalo, he is a symbol of his myriad. So when he saw the myriads, he said the myriads, but he knew that the myriads weren't a multiplicity of divinity in heaven, but a singular God. And so the heresy that seems to drive everybody crazy or dead seems to be seeing dualism on high. Okay, so the Acher story about Metatron was you can't sit in the presence of God because sitting implies the potential for standing, which means there's a potential that something could be either this or that in the presence of God. And in the presence of God, there are no unfulfilled potentials and there are no opposites. Very Aristotelian, by the way. Right? Maimonides loves this. Right? That God is an absolutely unchanging, singular being, and there can be no dualism, no multiple anything in the presence of God. Okay? So that's what all of the heresy stuff is implying that there's some second power in heaven, aside from God, or some moment where God is not God, or some moment where an opposite of God is happening. And that's the heresy. And it comes up subtly in different ways in each of the stories, but that's the common thread. So we have two common threads in this portion of the chapter. The first one is singularity of God, heresy of dualism, or more. And the second common thread is Torah pure in the mouth of a heretic? Does a heretic sully their Torah so that Torah should not be learned from them, has no merit to save them, has no merit to save us? Remember, there was the a question about the guy who saw Elisha, the prophet Elisha, and said, hey, what's going on in heaven? And Elisha says, they're sitting around quoting all the Talmudim, except for Meir. Why except for Meir? Because he's tainted by Elisha ben Abuya. Even though Meir never did anything wrong. Remember, he walked behind the horse and stopped when they got to the edge of the Shabbat Eruv. Right? He never did anything wrong except continue to learn from Acher and continue to believe in Acher. And for that, in the heavenly hosts where they're quoting back and forth in joy the Talmud learning of the Chachamim, they're not quoting Rabbi Meir in that midrash. Now remember, we've got multiple agadot, multiple stories, multiple legends. They don't need to paint a single picture. But the editor of the Gemara has put them all in one place to try and create a common theme. So those are our two themes. Got it? Pure Torah from the mouth of a heretic, no dualism on high. Yes?
So, if at root, the theology of
Top of
divinity
16a, first 16a.
is, or participates in an Aristotelian vision.
Start that again.
If at root they are espousing a vision of God's unity that has commonality with Aristotle.
Okay, fine. Yeah,
Okay?
I'm with you.
That's Aristotle, Greek culture. So they're all participating somehow intellectually in a culture that Acher is simply being explicit about and clothing himself perhaps with more of the outward signs of that acculturation, which would seem to indicate that people build the highest walls between the closest neighbors.
Right. We save our toughest arguments for our closest associates and our hardest criticism for our closest associates, and we build our highest walls between us and the people right next to us.
That's just an observation.
Yeah.
That-
So
is that
let's
fair?
talk about this. Well, I don't know if it's fair or not. I mean, it's a conclusion. It's because it's a metaphor. So you've drawn a metaphor,
All right, well,
which is an
but
interpretation. So
take off
it's all
the-
fair.
take off the
Let's
wall
talk about
thing.
your point before. The assumption behind what you said is more interesting to me as far as Talmud study. And that is, you said that the rabbis are presenting a worldview that is basically in harmony with the same view of Aristotle as understood by Maimonides.
That's how I'm
Okay?
hearing you.
And I did present it that way. What's more so though, the agenda of the heresy that they're fighting against is a Greek philosophical question. They've allowed the question of dualism to be engaged seriously in their studies. So once they engage, they create legends, they tell stories, they quote Torah verses. They spend a lot of time arguing against the philosophy of dualism. In other words, they empower it. They empower the conversation about dualism. So the conversation that they're having in the Beit Midrash on this topic is a conversation that could happen in a Greek study house. And probably does. So in that sense, they are actually engaged in an acculturated philosophical Greek milieu.
Right, so what is dualism?
Dualism means there's God and something else,
Right.
contrary to God.
Good and evil.
Could be good and evil, could be good and capricious, could be good and chaos, could be God and another God, could be a male God and a female God, could be a bunch of gods.
Yeah, but that sounds not so much that they're on the same track, but there's just a little overlap.
If there's anything other than God, the rabbis don't like it.
Right. I agree with you.
But they have a problem, because they've got Seraphim and Ophanim, V'chayot HaKodesh, and Kol Tzeva Marom, and they've got all of these images in the Tanakh of the heavenly hosts and angels and beasts and messengers, and
Right.
how is that not dualism of divine forces?
No, because.
Of course it's
they're
not.
all servants of God.
But but wouldn't it have been easier if none of that existed and it was just God and us, like the Muslims do? Wouldn't that be easier?
Yeah.
It's not as hard as the Trinity, but it's harder than Islam. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And it has to get answered, so it shows up.
But I'm thinking of the prophecy, what do you call it, the one with all the...
Ezekiel's Merkavah,
Right,
the
Merkavah.
the chariot on high with the wheels, and the heavenly
Yeah,
beast
yeah,
with the
yeah.
wings and the up and the down, and the throne and a figure on the throne, and the chashmel blowing back and forth and all that.
So
Yeah.
that at least the rabbis couldn't ignore,
They can't ignore it because a prophet said it.
but that doesn't...
It's
lead
like
to-
Elisha and Elijah. I wish they didn't exist. Like you lie down on top of a dead kid and he breathes. I don't like it. But it's there, right? So I've got to deal with it. So the rabbis deal with it. They deal with it a lot. And, it's like I'll do a modern analogy. From the important to the inane. Do you know who Kevin Durant is?
No.
Kevin Durant is a star basketball player for the Golden State Warriors who used to play on the Oklahoma City Thunder. And he was one game away from taking the Oklahoma City Thunder to the finals where they would have won the national championship. And the next season he left the Thunder and he joined the other team, which had already won the national championship without him, and then became an unstoppable force. So basically the sport of basketball is broken because you have superstars on one team and nobody stands a chance, not even LeBron James. Okay? So Kevin Durant went from being a good guy, he was in like movies and kids commercials, his mother was the face of Campbell's soup, for God. He was like the good guy, to being the evil guy who was selfish and and all this other kind of stuff and has destroyed the sport. So he goes in front of the press on a regular basis to try and argue against what they're saying about him. Which means on a regular basis, he is maintaining the dialogue about whether or not he is this thing. So he empowers the conversation to continue every time he denies it. Right? He's really creating it.
So you're comparing that to the rabbinical
So
discussion.
by the rabbis bringing up dualism over and over and over again, they are empowering the philosophical idea of dualism.
Not at all, I think they're just discussing it. It's a fair subject for discussion,
I agree.
because they can't ignore... the
The Merkavah isn't dualistic. The Merkavah is physical, but not necessarily dualistic. It's
Well, I'm
just
saying that they were...
psychedelic and technicolor, but it's just weird, right? So it demands interpretation, right? Okay, enough. The Acher thing dualism is all over this thing.
I want to leave this with you for a future.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's a not for now thing. All right, so let's go on. So the first thing was Rabbi Bar Bar Chana said the holy myriads, and Akiva said that God is the myriad, so there aren't myriads, it's only him. Abahu said, my beloved is white yet ruddy, preeminent above the myriad, and Dugmahu B'Rava Shalo, he's represented by the likenesses in his myriad, and Reish Lakish says, God, the master of legions, is his name, he is a lord in his legion. Again, all these verses that mean multiple things are being interpreted as just a singular God. Rav Chia Bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, God is not in the wind, which is from Elijah. Ve'achar haruach ra'ash, and after the wind came an earthquake. Ve'lo bara'ash, and God was not in the earthquake. Ve'achar harash eish, and after the earthquake came fire. Lo ba'esh Adonai, and God was not in the fire. Ve'achar ha'esh kol d'mamad daka, and after the fire was this thin, simple, small voice. And Hine Adonai Over, and behold, God was passing. So he has a whole series of things about Elijah the prophet who saw the same kinds of things Moses saw, but came to the conclusion God was not in any of those things, and God is only this still small voice speaking to me. Okay? So again, this is now not just non-dualistic, this is now non-physical. This is the proof text in our stuff that God is a completely non-physical being, and that revelation comes through non-physical means. Okay, now, and then the rabbis taught in the Baraita, now that Acher had heard from behind the partition, the Gemara goes into a long thing about that has to do with also the partition, because it talks about demons and humans, and how are demons similar to humans and humans similar to demons. And one of the things after that is that they're ministering angels who are behind the partition. So we have a verbal connection here. Remember, the Talmud gets distracted. If there was a story of a blue jar in a story that we just did for a different reason, it can very well say, oh, by the way, speaking of blue jars, and it's going to then tell you 3 other stories about blue jars. That's what happens here. Acher said, right, that Acher had been behind the partition. Acher had heard that he was condemned from behind the partition. Akiva had denied any multiplicity of God behind the partition. And so now we've got other stories that have to do with behind the partition. Fine. We did all that. In the week and 2 before we did the Elisha ben Abuya stuff for this month, we did all that. So skip, and we are on the 2/3 of the way down on 16a. You're looking for Darash Rabbi Yehuda Barabi Nachmani. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav Nachmani, the spokesman of Reish Lakish. So, if you're in the Hebrew, you see a thin column, a medium column, at the very bottom a fat column. We're in the medium column. Darash Rabbi Yehuda. If you look to the left side of the traditional print of the page, the last Tosafot has the big word Shnayim. On the left column of the Hebrew page, the big word Shnayim. Outside of the Gemara column, on the Tosafot column to the left, big word Shnayim. 4 words to the right of the word Shnayim in the Gemara, Darash Rabbi Yehuda. It's Tet Zion Aleph. Tet Zion Aleph on the Gemara page.
I got page 32.
No, you should be on that would be a B if you got an English page. Tet Zion Aleph. Let me check.
Talking about this, there is a page.
Oh, the Sunseon gave you English numbers?
This one here. But that's not the page before. And it says that's small. It's between the picture. Maybe you don't have it either.
There it is. There's Darash Rabbi Yehuda. Okay?
Okay, got it?
But that doesn't line up with this. That lines up with. There.
Got it. Ready?
So in the English, we're on the second today, or?
Rav Nachmani.
Yeah. Okay,
Yehuda, the son of Rav Nachmani. Okay, we're actually going to study now, half an hour in. Okay? All right, very good. So, this is, I'm going to have to change the page. So I did. Yeah, 16a, about 2/3 of the way down. And in the Sepharia, those of you who are online, you'll see it's in the middle of a long paragraph, and you'll see bold, Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rav Nachmani, the disseminator of Reish Lakish, interpreted a verse homiletically. Whoever looks at the following 3 things, his eyes will grow dim. Okay? One who looks at a rainbow. Okay? Because it says, as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, which is a description, this was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. This is from Yechezkel, from Ezekiel. This is one of the ways he describes the flashy part of the divine image in the chariot that we were talking about a minute ago. So there's a prophet who has a psychedelic experience of the presence of God, which unfortunately, for clarity's sake, also includes the image of a person sitting on a throne, and the throne is on a chariot or a cart that has wheels and angelic beings all around it, and lights and flashing and thunder and wind and all kinds of things. One of the ways the prophet describes the colorful nature of it is that it's like the rainbow on a day of rain. Okay? Remember, this chapter began with a prohibition about studying the Merkavah. And they said, how far up the image of the Merkavah, from the wheels up, or from the chapter, from verse 1 into the chapter, can you study before the prohibition comes into place? You're not allowed to tell anybody. This image is beyond that point. Okay? So
He
that
thinks he sees God.
he sees something that is an image that comes from God, and what the image is a matter of interpretation. But he's looking up and he sees the heavens open and the image of, and he tells it to you. A lot of ink has been spilt over the years figuring out what it is.
But psychedelic,
It's very psychedelic. It's very psychedelic.
did they?
Did they use drugs?
Well, maybe not drugs.
One of the recipes for the besamim, for the incense burnt in the first temple does have cannabis as one of the things in one of the interpretations. It is potential that there was something in the incense smoke on the incense altar. Many items were there, and at best it would have been what we call secondhand smoke in an outdoor theater. So you're not going to get much from it. It would have been very subtle. It's not like he dropped mushrooms and sat looking at Pink Floyd album covers for the day.
Right there. That's it.
Right, okay. All right, my dichtiv. So he says, why does it written, do not trust a friend. You ready? Oh, we did the rainbow thing. The rainbow, the prince, the Kohanim. We did that last time, and then we pick up the next teaching of Darash Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Nachmani, Mitur Gamane de Reish Lakish, my dichtiv. So everyone with me? Go past the rainbow and go to the next teaching of Nachmani. Why is it written? Lo ta'aminu bere'a al tivtechu ba'aluf. Don't trust a friend, don't rely on an official. And the end of the verse is, guard the doorways of your mouth from the one who lies in your bosom. Im yomar lecha yetzer hara, if you say it says don't trust a friend or an official because of the evil inclination, chato HaKadosh Baruch Hu mochel. And when the evil inclination says to you, im yomar HaKadosh Baruch, I'm sorry, im yomar lecha yetzer hara, if the evil inclination says to you, chato v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu mochel, go ahead and sin, God will forgive you, right? If the evil inclination tells you to do this, al ta'amen, don't trust in it, don't believe in it. Shneimar al ta'amen, because it is written, do not believe, be'ra ve'ein re'a ela yetzer hara. So they're going to do a pun here where the neighbor, which is reish ayin hey, or reish with two dots under it, ayin with a line under it, a re'ah is a neighbor. They're going to make a pun from the root ra'ah, reish ayin hey as well. And they do this all the time. It's not a logical proof, it's literally a pun. Since we have a homonym, we can say both ideas. We call this ad hominem. Thanks, appreciate that. Do I earn a cookie for that one? Shneimar, as it is written, ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra, because as it is written, because the heart of man is evil from his youth. That's before the flood. Ve'ein aluf ela HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and there is no aluf except for the Holy One, blessed be God. Shneimar, as it is written, aluf ne'urai atah, you, God, are the aluf of my youth. Shema tomar mi me'id bi, and perhaps you'll say, who will testify against me? Avnei beito, the stones of his house, v'korot beito shel adam, and the beams of a person's roof. Hem me'idim bo, they testify against him. Shene'emar, as it is written, ki even mekir titzak v'chafis me'etz ya'anena. For the stone will cry out from the wall, and a chip from the beam to testify. All right, so what does all that do? They've gone everywhere from Ezekiel to Numbers to Micha to Genesis to Jeremiah to Habakkuk in that one paragraph. So there's a lot of stuff. We don't need to chase down all the language and all the verses. The bottom line is they have a verse that says, don't trust a friend, don't rely on an official. And the don't trust a friend is the evil inclination. You shouldn't trust him, saying that if you do it, God will forgive, because aluf in this is, in fact, that you should not trust God, don't rely on God. How can you not rely on God? Don't rely on God to forgive you. Okay? So the Yetzer Hara comes in and says, don't believe the Ra'ah, like it's not bad, God will forgive you. And it says, no, that verse means don't believe the Yetzer Hara and don't rely on the Aluf God to forgive you if you do. If you do it. Okay? What's this doing here in this chapter? Well, you could say we had one Nachmani, so they did another Nachmani. Could be that simple. But the other idea is it's an example, think about it, where a person cannot be forgiven their sin. What are the circumstances where you cannot be forgiven your sin? You ever study this? The obvious one is murder, because the person you killed can't forgive you.
Public Hilul Hashem.
Okay, so Chilul Hashem, public desecration of God, depending on who you are, they mitigate that. Like a person can save their life by kissing the idol. A rabbi can't,
Right.
but a person can, because rabbis aren't people.
Well, they are also their office and.
Right, we represent. It's like Moses and the rock. If Shlomo hit the rock and water came out, he would have gotten into the Holy Land. But Moshe did it, and it makes it look like Moshe's got powers, not God. Okay. The other one is, and we learned this in Mishnah Yoma, in the Mishnah on Tractate Yom Kippur, Ha'omer echatava ashuv, ein maspik biyado la'asot teshuvah. The one who says, I will sin and do tshuva, his tshuva is not effective. So you ever hear someone say, you know what, sometimes it's easier to say I'm sorry? You know that phrase? Like if you ask and the person says no, and then you're going to do it anyways, and now you're doing it after they already told you no, and you had this conversation, you're going to do it anyways from the beginning. Sometimes it's easier just to do it and say you're sorry later, knowing that they're going to disapprove. That actually doesn't work in classic Jewish theology. If you do it on purpose knowingly, you're a mazid. You're doing it, you're a metzben, you're warned, you're knowledgeable, and so forth. And it's as if you have already been warned against doing it. So you don't get out of the punishment. You're going to have a punishment. Right?
It's all over in politics, and everybody's always apologizing for something.
Right.
Which I always feel when they apologize. If they didn't feel the way they felt, what's the
Right. Don't look to the behavior of politicians to learn how to properly do tshuva.
But it's around you. They're always apologizing. Oh, I said this thing.
Yeah. No, I just left out that one word, not. Right? I did. I meant to say I did not. You know, it's understandable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me, so what happened to the gates of tshuva are open until the day of your death?
For some things, they're not.
Okay.
If you murdered somebody, what can you do? I mean, all you can do is do your best from that moment forward. Do tshuva, support his widow, publicly confess your crime, bring your sacrifices and your prayers, feel horrifically guilty all the days of your life. I have no idea what you can do. And hope that when you stand before God, it's enough. But you can't actually do tshuva in your lifetime with a person that you murdered.
How about you murdered like in self-defense?
That's not murder.
But prior to the bat kol, had Acher publicly done things that rose to the level of murder?
Not unless you put the story of the children in the Beit Midrash and Rabbi Meir on Shabbat, him riding the horse, in front of the bat kol.
Okay.
But that would mean that a guy who's riding a horse on Shabbos has the ability to go and be with Metatron in heaven. And it's hard to believe that a person who's a heretic would be understood by the rabbis to have that ability. So it doesn't make sense.
The conclusion of the story is Acher is not welcome. I mean, that's what.
He's only brought into heaven by the power of the Talmud learning of another rabbi at the end of that story. There's nothing he ever does in his life or death that merits acceptance in the presence of God.
Right,
That's the conclusion.
right.
Okay, here we go. So this was another story where somebody is not forgiven. The person who says, I will sin, and maybe I'll forgive later. That's considered Yetzer Hara, and it doesn't work. Now, Chachamim Omrim, the rabbis say, Nishmato shel Adam, the soul of a person, me'idad bo, testifies on him, which is a very interesting idea, that somehow you are not entirely your soul while you're living, and your soul is going to fess up and rat you out for everything before God. Right? Shene Amar, as it is said, and we're back to Micah again, Micha, Mishochevet chekecha shmor pitchei picha. Guard the doorways of your mouth from the one who lies in your bosom. Ezohi davar, and what is that thing? Sheshochevet becheko shel adam, which lies in the bosom of a man. Have omer zo nishama, one would say this is the soul. Now, Rabbi Zrika Omer, Shnei malachei hasharet melavim oto, two ministering angels escort a person who has died. Hen me'edin bo, and they testify against the person. Shnei amar, as it is said, Ki malacha vitzavelach l'shmorcha b'chod rachecha. This is Psalm 15, maybe. He will guard his angels to concerning you, to observe you in all your ways, or he will charge the angels to guard you. He will command the angels to guard you in all of your paths, in all of your ways, which would mean including the path after death. V'chachamim v'yeshomrim, and there are others who say, Evarav shel adam me'edim bo, your limbs will testify against you after you die, Shnei Amar, because there's a Torah verse that says, Va'atem adai ne'um Adonai va'ani el. You are my witnesses, the word of Hashem, I am God. And the way that one works is that he will testify himself to all the iniquities for which he will be rebuked. So it's kind of a self-confessing thing. All right, and then that's the end of the discussion regarding the first Mishnah. And all of that topic now gets dropped. Okay, so we are going to learn the next Mishnah, just for fun, because you're always moving forward in Talmud study. But let's try and see if there's any conclusions you would come to. So the original Mishnah was, can't study sexual laws in the presence of more than three. And why did you need three there? Why is three too many?
One of them has to be knowledgeable, is that?
Nah, because when the rabbi is telling you who you're not allowed to sleep to, the other two are going to be shooting paper airplanes or something, right? They're going to be talking to each other, distracting, and then they won't learn such an important halacha, and they could, lead others to sin, lead themselves to sin, wind up in Gehenna, etc., etc. The Talmud said, well, doesn't that apply to any law? What's so special about this one? And the idea was that the sexual stuff you are drawn towards. So when left to yourself, you are going to do these things that are forbidden to you because you have desire towards them. Now, I read the list, maybe a couple of them. But it only takes one, right? So that's why. Because the other things in the Torah, it's not like I'm drawn towards shatnez, right? I really have this urge to mix the threads in my clothing. It's not such a thing that's going to cause so much trouble. All right, the second one was Maseh Bereshit, creation in the presence of two. And then the third was the Merkavah, right? Even in the presence of one, and he needed to be knowledgeable and come to it of his own. And then we had the idea that anybody who's not chas al kvod kono, anyone who doesn't desire or worry about the honor of their God, it's better that they should not have been in the world. Right? Better for whom? Better for the world, better for them, better for God, don't know. And then they did a little bit on that, not much. And the whole story then got taken over by two things. One, what is the forbidden moment in the Merkavah where you're not allowed to study? And it was Chashmal. Unfortunately, Chashmal shows up twice in the first chapter. Is it in the first coming or the second coming that you're not allowed to study past? And Chashmal was considered to have an invoking power. Not evocative, invoking. So like an invocation. If somebody who's properly teaching Chashmal, the Chashmal will burst into the room. And it's heavenly fire, like Nadav and Abihu. And there were two different stories of people who unwittingly, innocently, stumbled upon the truth of Chashmal while they were teaching it, and they got blasted by this fire. So that really turns out to be the argument why you shouldn't be studying this unless you're a great rabbi who already knows it properly. the unprepared should not even stumble across this. Okay? And then we got the whole Elisha ben Abuya and the 4 who entered Pardes, and all the things associated with that, which remains, to my mind, resolved. Unfortunately, I'd like to say it's unresolved, but it's resolved in an unsatisfactory manner. And that is to say that the acculturation of Elisha ben Abuya makes it impossible for him to be accepted anymore in the Torah community. His incessant reading of Greek books and singing of Greek songs and makes it impossible for him to do tshuva because he'll never have it in his heart to do tshuva. And as a result of that, he says, fine,
Goodbye.
hookers and horses from now on out. And that's what he does. And Meir never loses faith in him and the system of tshuva, and Meir is proven wrong
By the students and
by the Gemara. Now, this is the editorial level of the Gemara. Now, of the 10 or 15 different Agadot that are in this chapter, the different legends and stories that we have, very few of them have anything to do with each other if you came across them in a library. You would not take these 15 stories and put them together and say they are talking about the same thing. Each taken on their own are talking about completely different topics. So the editorial work of the stam, of the person who put these stories in this order when the Talmud was put together and finished, whether this Masechet is 5th century or 7th century, I'm not sure. I haven't studied it. As far as the historicity of this chapter and when it was done, we have ways to do that based on who's in it and which versions are used and all that kind of stuff. We're really good at telling you when a tractate got edited now. Whoever did that was of the opinion that a heretic cannot be learned from. And left it at that and moved on.
So the heretic cannot learn Teshuvah, ever.
I have had, in my rabbinate, several minor cases and one major case of a person who came to me to do religious teshuvah. So this is a Jewish person, raised and educated as a Jewish person, had the bar or the bat mitzvah, accepted it, understood it, was living in the community with their family, etc. There's no sniff of weakness to the pedigree. Converted to a contrary religion, publicly and knowingly, a shanda and a scandal in the community, to the oi of the family, and everybody who was talking about them at the Kiddush for 20 years.
20 years.
Oh yeah. Do you know some Jewish people? Ever been to a Kiddush?
You repeat the same stories that you say it, and I don't mean them.
Right. So yeah. And the person was publicly living that life. Right? So it's not like anybody could get away from it anyways. Right? Okay. So the person comes to me and says, I was wrong. I was wrong. I don't believe it anymore. I want to come back.
what do you do?
What do you think I should do?
Welcome you
I
back.
think you should offer them an opportunity to come back.
How?
I don't know.
Just give them Rishon on Yom Kippur and say it's done?
No,
I
You can't throw some holy water on
that
them.
once the conversion doesn't really count, that if you are Jewish and you convert and you decide to come back, you never left.
I thought you had to
That's what
convert
I-
back to
In
Judaism.
other words,
I'm
once
not
you're a
sure.
Jew, you're
If the
a
question
Jew.
is why
Okay, what
did
is
he change his
the
mind?
answer?
I'm not saying if it's a he or a she, and I'm not saying you where and when it happened.
So
Right,
what
so-
is the answer? That's what I had.
So- It's clear that this is a process of tshuva. From a Jewish point of view, a Jewish person who becomes a heretic is a heretic. Okay? They are, and name the religion, Hindu, Christian, depending on your opinion of Buddhism, whatever, right? Whatever they've become, Yoruba, it could be anything. Anything that's contrary to Judaism. If somebody asks me while they're in that worship community what they are they Jewish? I know different people answer this differently. I say, no, they're not. Ask them what they are. They'll tell you what they are. How am I on what basis am I going to deny their religious identity? They will tell you what they are.
Right.
That's the answer. So I've had people try and tell me that person counts in minyan because they have a Jewish mother. You turn to them, are you Jewish? I had a Jewish mother. Not what I asked. Are you Jewish? No, I'm blank. Okay, you don't count in minyan.
Okay.
Simple.
Get to the bottom line. What?
All right. On the other hand, conversion would be inappropriate. It would be a bracha levatala, taking God's name in vain, because I'm converting a Jewish person to Judaism. They were born Jewish, so it's not like I'm going to do a bris. We already did a bris, if it's a guy, right? And I said, L'hach niso b'vrit tov Avraham. They were already entered into this covenant. So what would I say? L'hach ziro l'brit Avraham Avinu, to return him to the covenant of Abraham our father? Maybe, but that's not the bracha you would say at a conversion, right? So you can't convert them. So you have to either leave them out and say they're a heretic, they're acher, and they're never welcome back, or you help them do tshuva.
How?
And so what I did is I actually did, I did a 6-month course of study with the person before I let them come to synagogue. I need to see this. I need to know the sincerity. I need to be able to stand in front of this person's family, who will be in the second row, that I believe this is real. Right? So the first test is, before I disrupt the community, I need to know sincerity. So there was a half a year of study privately with me. After which, I bridged a conversation, very difficult, to the family from whom the person had been estranged. And said, I'm not asking your permission, and if this hurts you, I ask for your forgiveness. But I have a person. They happen to be this relationship to you. I have a person who's coming to me this way. And as a rabbi, I am bound to say yes. As a rabbi, I must say yes to a person who says this to me. And I must say yes in the community where I am a rabbi, which is this community.
You must say yes to the idea.
They can come into synagogue.
No, you must say yes to a person coming to you who wants to make tshuva. Is that right?
Absolutely. I must. And in this community, and tshuva is embodied by participation in the community in
Last
public
stage of
prayer.
tshuva, isn't it?
And what's that?
Isn't that the last stage of Maimonides' definition of tshuva, is participation in the community?
Right. And not repeating it again, that kind of thing. So for this person, the course of study, I said, try not to be the 10th person in the room between now and when I tell you. If you are, you are, and I'm not going to stop anything that happens. But try not to be the 10th person in the room. Be the 9th or the 11th. But try not to be the 10th person in the room. And then at the end of a year in the community, this person went to mikveh. Because mikveh is a mitzvah open to every Jew, and mikveh is a mitzvah known to be associated with tshuva and
Cleansing.
new beginnings, spiritual purity and cleansing. And this person went to mikveh prior to Yom Kippur.
Right.
And this person then, from that moment, came into synagogue wearing a talit at that point. And I gave this person the following Shabbat an aliyah to the Torah. Never spoke about it in the community, never had a conversation with anybody other than the immediate family once at the beginning of the process. But each step of the way, the person was normalized back into full participation in the community. And I think that that was the right way, not because religiously you draw a line in the sand and until they say the following bracha and do the following ritual, they haven't done tshuva. This person may have done tshuva before they ever talked to me. But there's a process by which a person has to normalize back into a community where there has been damage. And that's much harder. And that's what Elisha ben Abuya could never overcome. And that's what hurt Rebbe Meir, because he didn't adopt the excommunication. He maintained contact, and the community couldn't suffer that. And it was a problem.
How would the Orthodox have handled that?
What I did,
Yeah,
I think they would have just taken the person in right away.
they would?
Maybe mikveh right away, but tshuva is tshuva, drop him in the seat. Because I think they would count them in minyan in the meantime. Most of the ones I've spoken to. If you came back, you came back. You know, you're not wearing the cross, you tell me that it's a mistake, you've done tshuva, let's get you in, study with me now, you know, all that kind of stuff.
So, did you invent this process, or?
Yes.
It's the Tobin conversion class, or the Tobin route to get an aliyah.
How to get an Aliyah Yom Kippur without giving a pledge. Okay, first you pretend you're this, then you...
That seems unnecessarily convoluted.
It is very convoluted.
I have quick two.
Yeah, question.
Observation questions. I would have predicted all of those stages. Question, to your knowledge, did that person, in the process of tshuva, really deal with the family's pain?
Yes.
Because for Yom Kippur,
Yes.
that's
Well,
merit.
getting into the personal family stuff is probably farther than I should go, but I will say that everything about tshuva that you know, I taught this person and helped that person work their way through.
And second question, what did Franz Rosenzweig do after his Yom Kippur? Oh my God, I want to come
I
back.
have to say, I know very little about Franz Rosenzweig. I've only pretended to read The Star of Redemption. I've never actually read it.
Now you have to
Most
enlighten the
people
rest
who
of
have it
us.
in their- Almost everybody who has it.
It has been assigned to me several times
Has pretended.
in classes that I got passing grades. Therefore, I've read the book.
Because that's a pretty famous flip.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just
Now you have to tell the rest of us. We don't know what you're talking about.
Well, let's do that after class, because it's 1:02. I want to teach the Mishnah so that we don't just end, and we start the next. So the next Mishnah, which is on the bottom of 16a, the last 4 lines. Please look at the Hebrew if you can find it, and you'll see in the middle of the 4th line from the bottom, a big giant mem, taf, nun, yud, and a little apostrophe. When you're in Gemara, when you're in the column, you'll see, let me find the page for you here. Not that page. Let's go back. There it is. Page 14. Handwritten page 14, 4 lines from the bottom. Big mem, taf, nun, yud. Okay? Mem, taf, nun, yud in the Hebrew. When you're trying to find your place in the Gemara, in the Talmud,
Right there.
you look down these columns with word after word after word after word, with occasionally a semicolon break here and there, but otherwise almost nothing that ever looks like any kind of punctuation or separation, until you see this matni. Matni is an abbreviation of the word matnitin. It is Aramaic. Mem means a present tense verb. In Aramaic, taf is Hebrew shin.
You're on 15.
Ni.
16.
So the root here in Hebrew would be shin, nun, weak. In this case, hey.
Keep going.
Lishanot, vishinantam livanecha. You shall teach them to your children as you walk along your way, and you're rising and you're sleeping and so forth. From the Shema, you know. So the root is lishanot, to teach. You also know the root lishanot, to teach, from Rambam's Mishnah Torah, which does not mean the second Torah. It means the teaching of Torah. And the Mishnah itself, the book, the Mishnah, means the teaching. So this is Aramaic, matnitin. Matnitin is the plural form. We teach. Okay, so, or in this case, we have learned. So we learned, in the learning, the Mishnah, the following. So whenever you want to find the next Mishnah in the text, you look for the big matni. Okay, and that's how you find it. So now we're back to Mishnah. Mishnah Chagiga, chapter 2, Mishnah 2. Yosef ben Yoetzer Omer Shalosh Lismoch. Totally new topic. By the way, Chagiga means the Chag, the pilgrimage holiday. It also means the specific sacrifice that you were obliged to bring in the ancient temple days on any Yom Tov. Each of the different Yom Tovs carried with it a Chagiga that you had to bring in sacrifice. Each individual male. Kol zechurecha lo yira'eh rekam. All of your males shall appear before me, and none shall be empty-handed. Each lefi kafi birkat Adonai Elahav. Each according to the blessing that God has given him, he shall bring. So the rabbis codified that into a particular korban, a particular sacrifice, which they called the Chag sacrifice, or Chagiga in Aramaic. Okay? So we're back onto the topic of sacrifices. Yosef ben Yoetzer Omer Shalosh Lismoch. Yosef ben Yoetzer says not to perform smicha. Shaloyis lismoch. Smicha is when you brought your animal to the Kohen, you placed your hands on the head of the animal, and you declared whatever the thing is. This sacrifice is for forgiveness of me, for whatever, and so forth. And then the Kohen would take it, or the Kohen would place hands on it, depending on the ritual. But the owner was the one who has smicha, most important. And according to Yosef ben Yoetzer, that you don't do the hands-on in the sacrifice, on the Chagiga sacrifice. So it doesn't say on the Chagiga, but we're in the Masechet of Chagiga. So we know the topic is the Chagiga, the holiday sacrifice. And Yosef ben Yoetzer says you don't do smicha, you don't do hands-on. By the way, you know the smicha for a rabbi? You ever hear a rabbi get smicha?
Certificate.
It's not a certificate. Smicha means laying on of hands. That when you're declared a rabbi, your rabbi puts his hands on your head. And his rabbi did it to him, and his rabbi did it to him, and his rabbi did it to him, all the way back to the men of the Great Assembly. So we have an unbroken chain of people laying on of hands. It's a literal, physical, unbroken chain going all the way back. You can't study books by yourself, become a rabbi, and print a certificate from your computer. You have to have been touched physically by the rabbi who taught you and declared to be musmach. And Rav Yikari and Mori Yikari, and he'll be called a rabbi and a teacher among the people of Israel.
Is it an amazing experience?
It's a pretty cool experience. Yeah. It has dire consequences, though. So I don't recommend it for everybody. Yosef ben Yochanan says to do smicha. So they have an argument. Yoshua ben Parachia says not to do smicha. And Nitai Arbeli says to do smicha. And Yehuda ben Tabai Omer Shaloli Smoch. He says don't do smicha. And Shimon ben Shetach says to do shmita. And Shemaiah says to do shmita. And Avtalion Omer Shaloli Smoch, not to do it. And Hillel and Menachem lo nechlaku. But Hillel and Menachem didn't argue about this at all. Yatsa Menachem nichnas Shammai, but when Menachem left and Shammai took over that school of thought, Shammai Omer lo lismoch. He said you don't do it, and Hillel Omer lismoch. You do it. Now if you go to Pirkei Avot, and you look at the first chapter of Pirkei Avot, and you look at the Zugot, you look at the pairs of study partners from the time that the Pirkei Avot gets going, you realize that we just went down the chain of tradition of the early rabbinic leaders. There was a time when there were only 2 rabbis, and they had only 2 students, and they had only 2 students, and they had only 2 students. But Hillel said, you shall rear up many Torah scholars and so forth, and the thing got going in the schools of Hillel and Shammai. Evidently, in the Zugot, there is an argument. One person says you do, the next person says you don't, the next person says you do, the next person says you don't, the next person says you don't. Hillel and Menachem were the first 2 who didn't disagree. Menachem didn't live out his tenure. Shammai gets in charge of the place, and Hillel and Shammai, well, they can't agree on anything almost, and they have this difference of opinion. So now, what's going to happen?
Yeah, well, here it says Hillel did differ, but then when you turn the page, he does differ.
So, Harishonim Hayu Nisiim. The first of these were pairs were the Nasi of the courts. They were heads of rabbinic courts. Shniim Lahem Av Beit Din, and the second of them was the Av Beit Din. So the Mishnah seems to be saying something about in each of these pairs you have the difference between a Nasi in the court and an Av Beit Din in the court. Like a political religious authority in the court and the head of the religious ruling tribunal in the court, and maybe that's the nature of the difference of opinion. Maybe those people themselves did or didn't put their hands on because of their role. Maybe they're not teaching for everybody, right? So the Mishnah has this kind of qualifying thing at the end, which isn't clear, and it's exactly the kind of thing that the Talmud exists to help explain.
And the smoke is just
To
the
play,
one on
the word means
a sacrifice.
to put your hands on something. In this case, it's on the head of the animal.
Yeah.
So you come up to the courts in the temple on the Temple Mount, and you walk through the Israelite thing, and you get up to the border where the Kohen section begins, and there's lines of people with goats and lines of Kohanim on the inside receiving you one by one, and you pay your thing, and you bring your goat, and you declare what it's for, and the priest tells you it's either a kosher or not a kosher animal for what you're trying to do, and if it's all good, he says, put your hands on it, say the following line, blah, 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 blah. He takes it away, he slaughters it, he cooks it, he brings the parts back to you that you can have. You probably gave him a tip, and you went and cooked it with your family. That's how the whole, that's the retail side of the business,
Yeah, got it.
okay? And this would have been a very important retail issue, because
Yeah.
thousands of people bringing thousands of sacrifices, people are making their living off this. Okay? All right, next week is our last week. We'll get into this a little bit, and then we'll decide when we gather again, do we want to enter a new topic, or do we want to just stay in Chagiga, because Talmud is Talmud. But I'll tell you that the chapter you're about to enter is now going to be talking about the holiday sacrifice for the next, 10, 15 pages.
Okay, can I make an announcement? There's a book I'm reading called The Orchard by Yochi Brandeis. She's an Israeli author. It's not a very good book. It's historical fiction, but very, very interesting if you're interested in the lives of people at the time of Rabbi Akiva, which was very early. And she traces how in fictional terms, but apparently there's some background, how the Shemona Esrei was developed, how the